This is a quick tutorial for using the Moon Modular 563 trigger sequencer and also driving it from the computer with the Moon 553 MIDI to clock module. The trigger sequencer itself has 4 independent rows. The switch on time is how long each trigger is on. I recommend you take all of these switch on time controls and turn them all the way down. I usually do that, then turn it up to about halfway between 0 and 1, so it's a very short trigger. Then, when whatever you're triggering with this row or this row, if it calls for adjustment, you can adjust it up and down to see what it does, but usually it works best when these are really low. Each switch has 3 positions, up, middle, and down. When it's up, the red light will flash and it will send a trigger out. In this case, this is row 1, it would send the trigger out, row 1 trigger out here. If it's in the middle, it does not send a trigger. If it's all the way down, it resets. So if you take, say, trigger position number 4 and turn it click, click to the down position, it'll play triggers 1, 2, 3, and then just keep playing 1, 2, and 3 until you take this switch and bring it back either to the middle or the top position. The reset button forces it to relocate to position 1. I wish it had a position 9 like the Moog, but it doesn't. This unmarked jack is the reset in jack, sort of like the stage 9 in jack on a Moog, except it is a little squirrely, but you can make it work. It's not hard. You bring your trigger input that's going to clock this from the output of the 553 into shift input number 1. These inputs are normaled. So if you bring a clock output, say from the variable clock out of the 553 or the static clock out, 16th notes, into shift 1, it will shift all 4 rows equally. If you were to bring in, for instance, the variable clock out into shift 1 and set it to a different tempo, like much slower, and then take the fixed 16th note output into shift 3, the first 2 rows would shift at the rate of the variable clock. The 3rd and 4th row would shift at the rate of this one. In our system, this is upside down for reasons that aren't important. So just be aware that what you're going to end up using is the stop output. That's what you use when using 960s. You feed the stop output into the stage 9 input of the 960. If you're going to use the Moon 563 trigger sequencer, instead you use the start output into the reset input. So let's take a look at that. In this picture, I have physically moved the 553 from this position, which is where it actually lives, down here, in order to make it easier to see the patch that I'm making. I have also taken the slew limiter, which is normally all the way on the lower left-hand side right next to the mult, and moved it here again just to make it easier for you to see what to do. So you can take either clock output here. Let's say that we take the variable clock output, and you're going to bring it into the shift input. If you want to also have this control a 960, all you would do is you would mult it. So now it's going into the shift input of a 960 and also into the shift input of the trigger sequencer. Now what you do is you take the start output jack and you plug it into the reset input. And you would also, of course, if you were doing this patch, you would take the stop out into the stage 9 input of the 960. Now, this in theory should work, and it does about half the time. The times that it doesn't work, what will happen is when you hit start on the computer, at the point that the 960 is at stage 1, this will end up being at stage 2. So it will go in synchronization with the 960, but it will be one step out. If that happens, it's a very easy fix. All you do is you take the start output, it's going into the reset, and you need to essentially put what would be a trigger delay on this, just barely. And I have found that what will work is if you come into a slew limiter, and remember, this slew limiter is all the way on the lower left side of the modular, just under the MIDI interface. Out of that into the reset input, and then all you do is you turn the amount knob all the way off, and that delays the trigger just long enough that now this will play stage 1 when this is playing stage 1, and they are in perfect sync.